Shalom Aleichem, Erev Tov, good evening. Welcome back to our Mishpat Tzedek shiur here at the Shiviti Midrash of New York. If I could ask, I know you've got a number of notifications recently in the Google Classroom, but did anyone get a chance to look at Yeshayahu chapter 1 like I ended off with last week? Yeah? Alright, so I'm sure you know that we read this as a haftarah later in the summer. But I'm interested, curious, any impressions anyone had about Yeshayahu chapter 1?
It's very familiar, it's Eicha.
It's not Eicha, it's Yeshayahu. But we read it in connection, certainly, when we are mourning the Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. Everything that's written in this chapter of Yeshayahu, in my opinion, minus the sacrifices, we literally suffer from in every single generation since. Everything is as relevant as it ever was. Essentially, that's why Yeshayahu is a prophet. You know, that's kind of how prophecy works. But not just why he's a prophet. I don't mean that humorously. I mean that there were many, many prophets. As Chachamim tell us in Masechet Megillah, there were thousands of prophets. So why were these prophets chosen to be memorialized, to be eternalized? Because their prophecies were relevant also for future generations. If our Chachamim told us to read this book of Yeshayahu, the reason for it is very simple. It's because likely, if we're reading it in San Diego or New York or Los Angeles or even Yerushalayim, unfortunately, these problems still exist like they ever did. I think there's a part here where everyone talks about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares less about sacrifices than he does about being a good person, right? We talk about that a lot in the context of sacrifices. But it's always very interesting to me because the point here is not sacrifices. I mean, let's read together if you want, if you have it in front of you. The Navi tells us, Limdu hetev, learn how to do good. Dirshu mishpat, seek justice. Ashru chamotz. Take a victim and validate them. Shiftu yatom, judge fairly for the orphan. Rivu almana, fight on behalf of the widow. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us what is the point of Jewish society. We have Jewish societies where everybody goes to the Beit HaKnesset and everybody's kids go to Jewish school and everybody eats super kosher food and everybody has aluminum foil on their countertop for Pesach. You know, we're in the season right now, so it's the season to be jolly. But aside from that, where do we find the Jewish society that does good, that fights on behalf of the widow, of the orphan, of those who are victims of our own Kehillat? How could our Kiryah, our faithful city of Yerushalayim, become Zonah? Listen, I know our scroll usually translates that word as an innkeeper, right? Like Rachav, the innkeeper, but we're all adults over here. Rachav is not an innkeeper solely, yes? How could our city, that is supposed to be a city of faithfulness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's teachings, become a place that is corrupt? Mishpat Tzedek yalin ba, ve'atam meratzechim. It used to be a place where you could find Mishpat Tzedek, where you could find righteous judgment. And today, everyone is murderers. Saraich? What about the leaders of the Jewish people? The politicians that we've appointed? The Dayanim, the Chachamim, the Poskim? Saraich sorerim, v'chavrei ganavim, kulo ohev shochad v'rodev shalmonim. I didn't even want to translate this pasuk. They love money and bribes, power, influence. Our leaders have become corrupt almost exclusively because of money, power. How much does it cost to be Jewish? How much does it cost to talk to a rabbi today? How much does it cost to get your product certified kosher? How much does it cost to get a get and a bedin? How much does it cost to convert to Judaism? How much does it cost to do everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us for free? Ma'ani b'chinam, afatem b'chinam. Just like I did it for free, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so too for you, it should be for free. Yatom lo yishpotu, v'riv almana lo yavu alehem. They're so busy with their money that our leaders don't care anymore about the orphan or the widow. Our HaShamayim tell us that orphans and widows are simply chosen as an example of people who lack the support system that others might have. That's why sometimes you'll find in the same category a ger, someone who joined the Jewish people, because even though they're not widows or orphans, but there's a certain lack of familial support that other people might have. But any downtrodden person, how have we become a community? We're reading Yeshayahu chapter 1. I'm not even talking later chapters of Yeshayahu. Just straight off the bat, Yeshayahu. How are we still guilty? When I was studying with you last week, and Rabbi Haim David Halevy told us we have to take a tangent and read Yeshayahu 1. I promised that I wasn't going to take too many tangents in this class, at least not in the introduction stage, because I want to be able to finish this introduction before Pesach. But I couldn't start Shiur today without asking you to look at these Pesukim, to look at the writings of our prophets. When they tell you we don't study Tanakh in Jewish schools, and that's a gross overstatement. There are definitely schools that study Tanakh, but not as seriously as they study other subjects. There are very few Batei Knesset that you go to that have serious classes in the Nevi'im and the Ketuvim. Even the Mikra, probably just regular Parsha 101 class. The reason we stay away from this book is because we can't handle reading it. Because most of the time the Jewish community is not sure how to justify what the prophets tell us we should be doing and what it is that we're actually doing. So the best way to do that is just avoid the problem altogether. Avoiding issues are much better than dealing with them. And it's a requirement for us to read the words, not just of our Chachamim, but our Nevi'im, our prophets. Those that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Ko Amar Adonai, this is what Hashem said. The Creator told us this. Not Rabbi Ploni or Rabbanit Almoni, but rather the Nevi'im. So, I don't want to talk about the divine consequences afterwards. Instead, I want to read with you our book that we're studying together, Devar HaMishpat. But I hope that you take time on your own to study Tanakh in general. But if not in general, then at least this chapter, it's posted in the Google Classroom if you'd like to take a look at it. Last week, we continue the introduction of Rabbi Haim David Halevy to Devar HaMishpat. If you can't find it, it's going to be in your Google Classroom, attached to the Zoom invitation at the bottom. Alternatively, you can look at the classwork section of the Google Classroom. It will be posted there at the top. Or if you're in the actual New York Google Classroom, then you will have received an email, probably earlier this morning, with the actual PDF attached to it there as well. I want to read to that last sentence that we read in the Gemara together last week. We mentioned our Chachamim who said, and I'm on page, I wish I had page numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the PDF, in the middle of the page, that I'm leaving my home of my own free will to put myself in a place of danger by going to the Bedin. I'm ignoring the needs of my household while I serve in the Bet Adin. And I come back empty-handed to my home because a Dayan does not receive compensation for Dayanut. And my only prayer, V'levai, shetehe bia ki yitzia, that my return to my home should have me just as innocent as when I left my home. You remember this we studied last week? Yeah, okay. said Rabbi Haim David Halevy, מתוך הכרת האחריות הכבדה המוטלת על שכמו לקיומה של החברה האנושית ולמעשה לקיומו של עולם. With this heavy burden on the shoulder of the Dayan, which is the responsibility to uphold a just society and essentially the whole world. שכן לשלושה דברים העולם קיים. The world is built on three things. על הדין, על האמת, ועל השלום. On justice, on truth, and on peace. By the way, those three things, they're not so easy to balance together. It's not so easy to also have truth and peace. You probably know this from your personal life. It's not so easy to have justice and peace, and justice and truth. Sometimes what is just is not always the right thing. Sometimes what is the right thing is not always just. It's complicated. But you need all three. Shneema. Okay. So we are in the next section. Under those three stars, that's where we begin today. Is everyone with me? Okay, good. Baruch Hashem. So essentially you have to ask a question. If being a Dayan, if being responsible for Jewish legislation and law is so incredibly dangerous, then why would someone want to actually do it? Why should a person sign up for the job? Or in the words of a parent to their child, what kind of job is being a rabbi for a good Jewish boy? At the end of the day, there are jobs that have less risk. You don't have to worry about sitting there in the Bet Adin with hell open beneath your feet. What did he say? You don't have to worry about judging HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and if you mess up, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will come for you. You don't have to worry about society and civilization and humanity. You can just do your job, go home. You'll come home with money. You'll come home not ignoring the needs of your family. What encouragement can we offer those who choose to involve themselves in this burden of Mishpat Tzedek, of ensuring a righteous world for humanity? In all of this burden that the Dayan carries on their back, that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is guaranteeing also assistance. Hashem is the one who gave judgment. You're not alone. I didn't throw this at you. I'm here with you. HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises to be there to help this individual in this most difficult task. And this is what our Chachamim say. Masechet Sanhedrin. Shema Yomar HaDayan. Maybe a judge will wake up and say, Ma li v'latzara hazot. Why do I need this problem in the first place? But I'm just going to point a note here. If you actually open up Masechet Sanhedrin, it's not going to say Ma li v'latzara hazot. It will say Ma li batzar hazeh. Same idea, but different words. I found already a few times in this introduction that there are variations between what Rabbi Haim David Halevy quotes from a source and what the source actually says. I have a few theories. Before that, let me ask you, is anyone familiar with a book, an Ashkenazi work called the Sefer HaBrit HaShalem? Have you heard of this book before? I'm not referring to the New Testament. That's HaBrit HaChadasha, different book. Yeah.
Nope.
No. There was a famous Ashkenazi Chacham. His name was Rabbi Pinchas Eliyahu Horowitz of Vilna, otherwise known as Rabbi Pinchas of Vilna. Rabbi Pinchas wrote a book called Sefer HaBrit HaShalem. This is a book of the covenant, a complete book of the covenant. It's a fascinating work. It's made up of two parts. Essentially, this is intended for the study of Kabbalah. Rav Peretz's father brought it to him as a gift when he was still in Morocco. Rav Peretz's father would travel a lot for business, and once he went and brought him back a book when he was a very young boy. He brought him a Sefer HaBrit HaShalem. Rav Peretz became very close to this book. Rabbi Chaim Vital writes in his Shaar Ruach HaKodesh on how to receive divine connection, or whatever you would translate Ruach HaKodesh as. He says that a requirement there is to know not just the whole Torah, but to know all the sciences and all the wisdoms and how the world works and geography and all kinds of things. And in order to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to first connect to the world. And Rabbi Pinchas Eliyahu Horowitz was very concerned that the traditional Ashkenazi system of study in Europe didn't have a way to connect to the sciences and to the wisdoms, let alone a comprehensive book that could give one essentially the basics they might need to know in Torah. And so he wrote a book of two parts. The first part is all about science, about history, about mathematics, about things like how thermometers work, at what temperature water boils, how the stars, and it's all based on, obviously, technology and scientific knowledge that he had when he wrote this book. There are things that definitely could be updated since he wrote that book. And the second half is all about Torah. In the introduction to this book, Rabbi Pinchas Eliyahu requests that nobody, all people who print the book in the future, that none of them should do two things. They shouldn't open up the acronyms. What I mean, open up acronyms? There's probably a better word for that than open up. In Hebrew, you have Rashi Tevot. You have people that write in acronyms, and then you're supposed to decode what are those acronyms. Sometimes the editors say, listen, they don't want people to have to guess, so they just spell it out for them. The problem is that sometimes the editors make mistakes, and then when you unpack that acronym, all of a sudden you have 3 wrong words in the middle of a paragraph. It says, please don't do that. Let whoever knows know. Whoever doesn't know, doesn't know. And the second, if you see a mistake in any book, but especially mine, don't fix it. Make a little asterisk, write on the side, there may be a mistake, but don't cross it out. How many manuscripts have been ruined because people thought they were fixing a mistake when really the editor was making the mistake and the manuscript itself was correct? There are so many examples of this, I can't even begin to share them with you. Here in this book, there's a few ideas why Rabbi Haim David Halevy has a few different texts. The most practical is one that Rabbi Haim David Halevy made a mistake. Likely, he was quoting by heart. And when he was quoting by heart, he remembered, listen, Halavai on us that we should be quoting pieces from all over the Torah and the Talmud by heart, and we're only a word off, yes? The second, it could be that he quoted correctly, but he was quoting from a different manuscript or a different edition of a work than what is in front of us right now. That's very possible. The third, it could be that he was quoting from a secondary source, and that secondary source maybe had a different version, or that secondary source adapted the language. So for example, this word, mali valatzara hazot, these are found directly in the writings of the Rambam. The Rambam paraphrases the Talmud and Sanhedrin. He doesn't say mali batzar hazeh, he says mali valatzara hazot. So maybe the Rambam had a different Talmud, but it could be Rabbi Haim David Halevy is recollecting that which he saw in the Rambam and not that which is in the Talmud. And lastly, it could be that the person who typed up the book from Rabbi Haim David Halevy's notes made a mistake. That could also be. The bottom line, what's the point of this tangent? It's very important when you read books to know what's going on inside of the text, to look up sources. I can't tell how many times I see people quote a source, and you know they're misquoting a source because they never looked at the source inside. They copied it from someone else who copied it from someone else who copied it. It's kind of like when Mrs. Cohen calls the Levy family and says, your son's been cheating in my class. So how do you know my son's been cheating? Well, I gave them a math quiz yesterday, and I wrote over there 2 plus 2. Johnny wrote 4, and your son David wrote 4 also. So that's the right answer. He says, yeah, but the next question is at 4 plus 4. Johnny wrote 8, and your son David, he also wrote 8. So I know, but that's the right answer. See, the problem was I asked him for the square root of 25. Johnny wrote, I don't know, and your son David wrote, me neither. Sometimes you have a person who's copying over a text, and they're making a mistake because they're copying from somebody else. I don't know what happened here, but forgive me if sometimes I point out for you that sometimes the text that is here is not exactly what we find in Masechet Sanhedrin. Back to our text. Shema Yomar HaDayan. Maybe the judge will say, Ma li v'latzara azot. Why do I need this headache of being a Dayan? Talmud Omar, what should a person learn? V'imachem b'dvar HaMishpat. Hashem is imchem, He is with you, b'dvar HaMishpat. By the way, even here, this is a quote from Devar HaYamim, which we mentioned last week. If you remember, it's in the, I think it's at the bottom of the previous page. Over there, it says, in my Tanakh at least, it says, b'dvar Mishpat. So, again, there's a little, but it means that Kadosh Baruch Hu is with you in judgment. Who said this pasuk? Last week we mentioned that Yehoshaphat, when he appointed judges, he told them, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be with you in the matter of judgment. El dayan, el ma she'enav ro'ot. So what does the law say? The law says that a judge, when he's sitting in judgment, doesn't have to worry about all the things they don't know. A judge rules based on what their eyes see. Let me translate to English. A judge is going to say, listen, I might make a mistake. Maybe I'm going to hear all the facts, all the stories. I'm going to interview the witnesses. But at the end of the day, I'll still make a mistake. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to send me some divine consequence for my mistake. Maybe I don't want to sign up for the job. 2 answers here. 1, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with you when you judge. Don't think you're doing this alone. It's not an alone job. But the second part of this, to recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu only expects from you to judge that which your eyes can see. HaKadosh Baruch Hu can see everything. He's with you seeing everything. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu only expects you to judge based on the information you have. Now this sentence here cannot be underestimated. It is probably the most important halakha that we have in all of Jewish law. You might not agree with me right now, but wait just one moment and I'll explain to you why. Hanidrash min hadayan. What is expected from the judge? לעשות את כל אשר ביכולתו לבירור האמת כפי שתראה בעיניו. The judge is expected, is responsible to do all the work, to take all the proper steps to ensure that they know the truth in this matter of judgment to the best of their ability. And if you wanted to see inside, look at the Rambam, chapter 23, the laws of Sanhedrin, where he spells this out. Ve'ezrat Hashem muftachato latzlachato. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises to help so that the lawmaker will be successful. V'dinhu. And it's a law. Kivan shekol dayan shedan din emet. Meaning, when the judge makes a decision based on what they see, what they know, that is the law. Kivan shekol dayan shedan din emet lamito, na'asa shutaf LaKadosh Baruch Hu b'maaseh bereshit. Because we are taught by our rabbis in Masechet Shabbat that every judge who judges a true judgment, meaning reaches true conclusions in law, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that they are his partner in creating the world. Klomar, what does that mean? Mikayem hu ta'olam, that this person is responsible for sustaining the world, ve'tzdara v'chavratiyim, and maintaining order in society, v'zehu retzon Hashem be'etzem ha'biriyah, and that is the whole desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in creation. There should be order in humanity. There should be justice in the world. Imken, min hadin shashutaf ya'azor b'msima she'utla alav. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a partner in judgment, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a partner in creation, and a judge who's judging truthfully, a lawmaker who's making true laws, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will hold up his part of the deal. If a partner means that two people are doing something, what is a partnership? There can't be a partnership, one person does all the work and the other one doesn't do anything. That's called a bad marriage. What is a bad marriage? One person is doing everything, the other one not doing anything. That's not a partnership. Just because you call them my partner doesn't mean they are your partner. The partner are two people who give everything they have to each other, and that's the way that they're able to sustain their whole world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises to do his part. If I'm your partner and you're my partner, I will do my part. You do your part, I'll do mine. Now, this is something we don't talk about so much in Jewish circles. And it's something that the West might not completely comprehend about our Jewish legal system. And that is, at the end of the day, as much as we human beings are involved in managing the world for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we believe wholeheartedly in the existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and in the constant involvement of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our world. A lawmaker is not alone. It's not a lonely place to be in. The company is that of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A lawmaker has to know, I'm making a law, and so long as I'm faithful to my Creator, to my partner in creation, then I'm okay. I'll be okay. I can only do what I can do, and I can only do what my eyes show me. Why did I tell you this is the most important law that we have? Because of what we're going to read about in the next paragraph. But before I get there, please let me read to you just a little piece of Masechet Shabbat that Rabbi Haim David Halevy did not quote. If you want to look in Masechet Shabbat, I'm on page 139a. Kuf Lametet Amud Aleph. We talk about how we want to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. People always want to know more about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They want to experience HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Can you give me some examples about how we can experience HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world? What are things we can do to ensure that we will experience divinity in this life? Yeah, go for it.
This has to do with taking care of Hashem's precious people, like the converts and the widows and the orphans and...
Okay, so being more God-like, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, and not just that, if just like I visit the sick, you should visit the sick, just like I am compassionate, you should be compassionate. Of course, I'll take it. Who else? Yosef, I saw you unmuted yourself.
I too said Chesed, but perhaps Shabbat is another aspect of it.
Okay, Chesed, Shabbat. If you've studied Rabbeinu Avraham, the son of the Rambam's book, The Guide to Serving God, Hamaspik L'Ovdei Hashem, he talks about a Pigiyah Elohit, a divine encounter that could happen to you while sitting at your Shabbat table with the proper feelings and consciousness and actions. Okay, I'll take it. What else?
Well,
Prayer.
that Hashem gave us that said, this is the way I want you to behave in life. And that, I think, will give us some connection.
Okay, so Marlene says, following the mitzvot is a sure way to experience HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I think there are dozens of Pesukim that will tell us that. Someone said prayer. Who said prayer?
That was me.
That was Zev. Zev says prayer. I think there's nothing else to prayer more than connection to our Creator. I know that people have given all kinds of other ideas about what is prayer, but prayer, B'Savos Davar, is the greatest expression of emunah. When we struggle with our relationship with the Creator, usually the first thing that gets hurt is not our study of Torah or our kindness to other people. Usually it's our prayer. It's our inability to have a conversation with a Creator that we're struggling with. And it could be that we're not even struggling with a Creator. It could be we're struggling with the false notion of a Creator, and that's why we're struggling with prayer. But that's part of a different conversation for a different shiur. Maybe one more before I read to you what Masechet Shabbat tells us of sure way, another way. All of these are right so far. Okay, let me read to you. Here's what Chachamim say.
Just before you read, where are you in Masechet Shabbat again?
Masechet Shabbat, Kuf Lamed Tet Amud Aleph, 139a. Says the Talmud, Ve'en HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mashre Shechinato Al Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not place His presence on the Jewish people. So there is something, you're talking about ways to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but we have two parts of connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does David HaMelech tell us? Sur Mera, you have to leave evil. Va'aseh Tov, then you must do good. You familiar with this pasuk? Yeah, we read it on Shabbat morning in the Beit HaKnesset. An unfortunate part of Tehillim is that everybody prays Tehillim, and nobody studies Tehillim. So Tehillim became like a book of segulot. You read it 40 times a day for 40 days in a row, and forwards and then backwards. And if you read this pasuk 7 times upside down, Tehillim became a book that nobody actually studies. It's a book that everybody's praying it. But if we would take a moment to just study King David's wisdom that he gave to the world, Sur Mera Va'aseh Tov. In order to do good, there are a lot of well-meaning individuals that want to do good, but you cannot do good before you abandon evil. You can't clean your shoes from the mud if you're still standing in the mud. Would you agree? You could pick up your right foot and clean it, and then put it down, and then pick up your left foot and clean it, but then your right foot will get muddy all over again. Before you try to do good, you must cleanse yourself of that which is wrong. Says the Talmud, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mashrei Shechinato Al Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to place His Shekhinah, His presence, on the Jewish people. Ad Shichlu Shoftim Veshotrim Ra'im Misrael, until the Jewish people rid themselves of all the evil judges and police officers of their people. So long as there is corrupt leadership in Am Yisrael, there is no chance for the Shekhinah to rest itself on the Jewish people. What we're talking about here, that one who judges based on the truth, Hadan Din Emet. So what does it say? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu will consider him to be a partner in the creation of the world. That's true. That's the positive side of this sentence. But the negative side of this is, and if this judge or this officer still stays part of Jewish leadership, then we will merit the exact opposite. We will merit the destruction of a world in which there is no divine revelation, in which there is no HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's a world in which, it's okay. I'm going to take a tangent. Soon, the Google Classroom is going to assign you homework. Not so long from now. Probably at 6:30 or 9:30 your time. To read an appendix from the book of Rabbi Jose Faur. It's Horizontal Society in the back of the book. I'm going to deal with that at a different time. Towards the ends of the shiur. But if I could read to you, and I'm not sure if I read to you already, but if not, it's worth hearing it again. There's a very intentional ideology that has come out in the Jewish world. And there's a reason for it. And I'm feeling that I may have read it to you, but it doesn't matter. I'll read it to you again. In his book, Horizontal Society, which will be posted soon in your Google Classroom, Chacham Faur, I have a few videos about him on my YouTube channel. If you put in his name, Rabbi Jose Faur, alav shalom, you will find a few different videos that I made about him. He writes the following. In part, this thesis, which we could explore on your own, rests on a view suggested by Rabbi Solomon ibn Verga, that Jewish tribulations are the consequence of a natural cause, hasiba hativ'it, meaning the mechanics of history, not of some paranormal punishment from the realm of the supernatural. When things go wrong in the Jewish people, like I told you last week, when you see tragedy happening to the Jewish people, Tse uvdok b'shoftei Israel, go and check the leadership of the Jewish people. This is not a divine consequence. This is rather the mechanics of history. Specifically that when faced with choices, inept Jewish leadership infallibly opted for the one leading to disaster. There's a whole ideology that was then created to deflect responsibility away from inept leadership and placing it in the realm of the mystical. He's going to pin this on the shoulders of Kabbalah. I'm not here to talk right now about Kabbalah and not Kabbalah. It's not the topic of the shiur. But essentially, we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the world is not all about consequences and punishments and the Creator always tit for tat with us. There are natural consequences. We make bad mistakes. Our leadership chooses wrong things for the Jewish people. We suffer from those consequences. What does it say in the pasuk? Avot achlu boser. Anyone know this pasuk? The parents eat unripe grapes. What happens next? We're going to improve. Very good. Rachel, v'shinei banim tikena. And the children's teeth suffer from the parents' choices. It's what you would say in America, secondhand smoking. I chose to smoke, but my child didn't choose to smoke. How can I pass on a problem that's not their fault? By the way, there are poskim who suggested that a child can sue their parents. I'm not telling you it's a good idea. Just that a child can sue their parents for medical issues not that parents have, but the parents brought upon themselves. And I think if you'd open up this kind of worms, that would never end. But there would be a lot of lawsuits that would be going on in Am Yisrael. For right now, what I can say. Yes?
I had a question. Isn't there a direct pasuk that says that a child is not punished for his father's actions?
That's right. When it comes to punishment, I'm not talking about punishment. If a parent decides to burn the house down to the ground, the child is not going to have a house to live in. Is that a punishment? No, it's a direct consequence of the actions of the parents. If we as parents choose to destroy the Jewish people and destroy the society in which we live, we will inherit to our children an unjust society, a society they will suffer in, and as such, they're going to suffer because of our actions. And this is the whole meaning of Chachamim, that lawmakers, that dadan din emet la'amito, a lawmaker that is on the path of truth, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will partner with them in the creation of the world. But that a person who doesn't do that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu cannot rest His presence in this world until we get rid of all the corruption in our governments, in our lawmakers, in our leaders. Because there will be no room for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to improve the world if we're actively trying to destroy it. It's not a divine consequence. This is the mechanics of history. This is how it works. And we've developed in the Jewish world a whole theology of, no, it's nobody's fault, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is punishing us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sending us a message, HaKadosh Baruch Hu this, HaKadosh Baruch Hu that. What does Shlomo HaMelech say about this mentality? Ivelet adam tsanef darko. The crookedness of a human being will ruin their path. Ve'al Adonai yiz'af libo. And they will get angry on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I mean, I messed it up, but I want to blame HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Either have to make a choice. Either HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're going to follow Him and the way won't be crooked, or it'll be crooked, but I can't blame HaKadosh Baruch Hu for it. When someone drives 120 miles an hour on the highway and then gets in a car crash, why? Because they wanted to get to the wedding faster. Yeah, it's middle of the night anyway, it doesn't matter. And that person dies in that car crash. then why do I have to blame HaKadosh Baruch Hu for that death? It sounds cruel what I'm telling you? It's not cruel, it just goes against Orthodox theology. It's what the Jews have been telling everybody for a long time. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is responsible for everything. All the bad things are his fault. One day we'll understand. Some things you don't have to wait for one day to understand. Some things I can explain to you very simply. This person died because of actions they took. I'm not talking here about a person with a mental illness, struggles with suicide. I'm talking about that. Why does everything have to become HaKadosh Baruch Hu's fault? What's happening in the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is trying to send... No, maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sending us a message. Maybe you decided to ruin the world. We own our actions. We have to. And because of that burden, that responsibility, it's because of this heavy burden that a dayan carries around with him. Shichera oto Torah mikavlei HaMishpat U'sdarav. It's because of this heavy burden that the Torah released a judge from the chains of judgment and its order. It's a translation. The explanation is better. I told you this halakha is the most important halakha we have. L'shem berur ha'emet la'amita. If you truly want, in order to be able to accomplish true judgment, rashayhu, the dayan is allowed to, permitted, lachrog midinei harayot ha'magbilim, to deviate from the limited picture which the facts show him. Are you listening carefully? It's a very, very tricky teaching what I'm about to teach you right now. Rashayhu lismoch al ma shenira lo emet lefi hakarat libo u'matzpuno. The judge is permitted to rule not based on the facts of the case in front of them, but on the feelings of his heart and his consciousness, what he knows to be true according to his heart and his conscience. V'lifsok, and to rule lefi ma she'irelo shehu mishpat ha'emet. And the judge can ultimately determine what they know to be true based on what they have reached as the conclusion of the law. Af im zeh soter et harayot ve'ha'eduyot shehuva'u b'mahalach ha'mishpat. Even if that directly contradicts the facts, the proofs, the evidence that was brought about in trial. Do you hear what he just said? How do you feel about what he just said?
It's frightening. It's really frightening. Because it means he could disregard the facts that are before him. And it just said that he can only make a decision based on how God is helping him and what he sees before himself.
But Aliza, that's the question. What he sees before himself, he sees all the facts. All the facts say that this person murdered that person. But based on what he's reading in this person's behavior in between the lines, on what the facts haven't shown and what wasn't found on camera, this judge knows this person is innocent. Can he execute this person?
Are we talking about evidence and not facts? I mean, if things are presented to him as evidence, but you're saying that this judge feels that these are not the true facts. It's just evidence as presented. And maybe there are things that should be presented that aren't there, or maybe they're being presented in a way that's coloring the facts, coloring the truth.
Okay, Marlene, I'm going to accept your distinction. Not all evidence in the way that this is presented is factual. But we're not, okay, Marlene's correct. We're not disregarding facts. We're disregarding proofs. All the rules of judgment. There are people that came to testify, there are witnesses, there's evidence, there's whatever information is used in the trial. At the end of the day, the judge feels this person is innocent anyways. This person is guilty anyways. Not a feeling, it's not a gut, it's not a I think so. When we say, Kol hadan din emet la'amita, the judge must rule according to the truth. What determines the truth? That's the question here. Yeah, you speak. Don't raise your hands. Just say something, because I don't. There's Baruch Hashem, a lot of people here.
This truth, it's a combination. Like it's a blend of the facts, how they're presented, how they're received, the situation. Like it's not cut and dry. It's very complex.
But what happens when we allow a judge to rule based on his conscience instead of ruling based on what evidence is presented there? At least you were bothered. Tell us what bothers you.
He just bothers me because it seems like he's saying the opposite. If the judge has like a gut feeling that this guy did not do it, whatever it is, and it seems like it's saying that he can go with his gut and, whatever's brought forth to him, he just has a feeling about it, and it seems like it's saying, go with your gut.
So how about I say it this way? Are we talking about gut here?
His feeling. It says if he has a feeling about something.
Can I insert a thought, Rabbi?
Please, Matthew.
It says emet la'amita, that they need the real truth.
Right, so we're trying to what determines the truth. Matthew, what did you want to share?
Well, when he's applying subjectivity, then he's basically saying that his perspective is above everyone else's. And that's the danger of subjectivity. It's not conceding to something that's higher. So in other words, something is clear and defined, and we recognize that it's got the correct source. When we apply subjectivity to it, we're basically saying that our opinion is higher than that, which is, to me, is wrong.
Let me push back, because I'm aware that everyone here is thinking in a very Western model. What's the role of the judge? If it's all about the evidence, and if it's all about objectivity and what has been presented, so why do I need a judge there? What's the purpose of the judge?
To figure out which evidence can be shown or not.
Okay, so it's to sift through evidence. So the judge is the one who's like keeping order. Like, that's not evidence. This is evidence. Objection, Your Honor. He can't say that. She can't do that. That's the judge. The judge is a referee.
Of sorts, a mediator maybe.
Okay, does everyone agree that's the role of a judge?
No.
It depends where. This is talking about a certain type of judge at a certain standard who has to balance at the justice, peace, and truth. And when he's doing that properly, he's able to actually do what is being described. But this kind of person is there's a high standard for this kind of person, and it will probably make you feel okay about what he's doing.
Yes.
If you found such a person.
So I need you to listen to Yochanan very carefully, because what Yochanan is telling you is what the Rambam says in the next halakha. Can you just allow me to pull out my Rambam for a second? If you wanted to look in the Rambam, the laws of Sanhedrin in chapter 24, the Rambam says, Yesh ladayan ladun, a judge can judge b'dinei mamonot. Now the Rambam limits this, just so you know, to financial matters. But ignore that. The point here is not which area. על פי הדברים שדעתו נוטה להם שהם אמת, והדבר חזק בליבו שהוא כן, the judge is able to rule based on what his mind tells him is true, and what is it's not a hunch. It's not his gut. What his heart tells him is the truth. אף על פי שאין שם ראיה ברורה, even though there is no clear proof to this. ואין צריך לומר, and there is no need to say, אם היה יודע בוודאי שהדבר כן, שהוא דן כפי מה שידע. That even though That if he knows what the truth really is, that he must judge according to the truth. He's going to give some examples of this. I'm going to give you an example now. I don't want to give an example right now. I'm going to give you an example. You can read the Rambam for yourself. I don't want to get into this mess right now. We're going to do this halakha together anyways, so why get stuck on it right now? But I want you to read the next halakha. Look at halakha bet of the Rambam. Kol elu hadevarim hem ikar hadin. All of this is true according to the letter of the law. Aval but, Yochanan, you're listening because it's for sure what you meant. Misharabu batei dinin she'enam hagunim. Ever since there has been an increase in batei din which are not righteous. Afilu hayu hagunim b'masehem, even if they were good people. Enam chachamim karau yuvale bina, but they're not wise as they should be, or they're not as perceptive as they should be. Hiskimu rov batei dinei Yisrael shelo yahafchu shivua ele beraya berua. Most of the batei din decided not to use this rule anymore. We only deal with evidence. We only deal with proofs. We don't deal with personal judges' opinions. There's too much corruption in the legal system to be able to just trust this. Now notice what he says here. That Rov Batei Dinei Israel, most of the courts in the Jewish people said this. That means that not all Jewish courts accepted this law, or this suggestion. The Rambam himself, by the way, in his Shelot V'Tshuvot, 421, he tells the Bedin there to rule according to their opinion and not based on the evidence that's in front of them. So we're talking obviously about a perfect world, in a perfect society, okay? We can't just say there's a rule all across the board that the facts don't matter, evidence doesn't matter, the proofs don't matter, but that technically the truth is the most important part. And if the evidence that is presented is not bringing the judge to the true verdict, the judge has to rule according to the truth anyways, even if that truth goes against the evidence that has been presented here. Don't jump on me yet. Let's read a little bit more. Look inside of your book. Zot ve'od, furthermore, and he's quoting here, En hadayan rashai lomar, this is from the Talmud, it's also in the Rambam. The Dayan is not allowed to say, Echtechenu v'yeh kolar talui b'tzavar ha'edim. I'm going to just decide the law based on the evidence presented here. There are witnesses, they testified this guy's a murderer. Let me kill him. Doesn't matter. I don't think he's a murderer, but the witnesses said so. The evidence says so. The fingerprints say so. I don't need to deal with it. I have all the proof that I need. Shneimar midvar shekir tirchak. The Torah says in the book of Shemot, a judge must stay away from lies. If you know that this person is not guilty, even if you have all the evidence there that claims to say he is, you're not allowed to say it's not. The onus is not on me. The onus is on the witnesses. The onus is on the those who brought the evidence. The onus is on the police officer. The onus is on the lawyers. You can't do that. You can't exempt your neck from the consequences if you make a mistake. Nosaf al kach, furthermore, and this one here is probably the most important ramification. I told you before, all of halakha is built on this. I need this to be understood very clearly. En taqdimim shel batei din acherim mechayvim oto. In halakha, in Jewish law, precedents of other courts do not obligate any other court to do anything. Precedents don't matter. What am I telling you? Explain to me what I'm saying. There's a story now. The judge is in court. This case was ruled on already by a different court in a different place. Are you familiar with this concept of a precedent in law? So tell me what happens. What do they do?
Whatever they say, we're going to decide this based on this case. These are circumstances in this case, and that was the decision. Now here it's the same, similar circumstances, and we're going to go that way. Very good. Can we do that in halakha? No. Every case has to be judged, again, on its own. By the way, the ramification here goes far beyond courts. In the homework that I'm going to assign at the end of today's class, this has to do with psikat halakha also.
Just a general question. You go ask a rabbi a question. You want to decide an answer to halakha question. Sometimes we'll say, listen, there's that opinion and that opinion. You can rely on one of them. But really that's an incorrect method of teaching halakha. There is no to rely on someone for something. My question is unique. It requires a unique analysis of sources. And you need to be able to render a legal ruling for this particular case. It doesn't matter what that rabbi said or this rabbi said. If that rabbi's methodology is correct, can you apply the same methodology here? Absolutely. You can, if the methodology is correct. But you don't say we rely on a precedent in halakha somewhere else. That's not the way that halakha works. I know that's the way, again, that Orthodox halakha works. It's not the way that halakha works. And so, at the end of today's shiur, there's some homework that I've assigned that's going to pop up in your Google Classroom any minute now. And I ask that you read it before next class, but I don't want to get carried away here. Sheken amar lehem, Rava l'Rav Papa. Rava told Rav Papa. This is found in Masechet Bava Batra on page Kuf Lamed Amud Bet, page 130b. V'l'Rav Huna bred Rav Ashi, and Rav Huna the son of Rav Yoshua. Ki ate piska dedina dideh lekamaychu. If one of my court's halachic rulings comes before you, v'chazetu be pircha, and you see that you have a question, there's something that doesn't sit well with you, with my ruling. Lo tikraune, again the words here are slightly different than what is found in my Talmud. Ad da'atitun lekamai. Please don't rip it up to pieces before you bring it before me. Meaning, don't disregard my halachic ruling before you discuss it with me. If I have another reason or a way to prove to you that I'm correct, I'll tell it to you. V'ilo, nehder be. And if not, nehder be, I will take back my ruling. V'hani mini michayim, that's when I'm alive. But if I'm already dead, lo mikra kiraune, de havina dil ma'it etama. Please don't rip up my rulings because maybe there was another reason that I can't tell you. V'lo migmar tigmeru mineh, but also don't rule a halakha based on my precedent that you don't agree with. De'eno ledayan ela ma she'enav ro'ot, because the judge can only rule based on what his mind, his eyes are seeing. And if you don't accept my ruling, it cannot constitute a precedent that you can rely on. So what is he telling his students? He's telling here, he's clearly a big dayan. There's a bedin, an authoritative bedin. So when you see one of my precedents in law, please don't rule according to, if you think that it's wrong, come talk to me first. Maybe I'll explain myself, or maybe I'll take back my opinion. And if I'm not here anymore, then don't rip it up, but also please don't learn from it. Because a judge must follow what they know to be the truth, and not what I've already determined in a different place that is the truth. Mikan lamandu, from here we learn. שהסתמכות על פסקי דין קודמים של בתי דין יותר גדולים, that relying on precedents, legal precedents of other courts, כוחו יפה, רק באם מסכימה דעתו של הדיין לכך. It only works when the dayan says, I like that methodology and that methodology can be applied here. דאם לא כן, because if that's not the case, אין לדיין אלא מה שעיניו רואות. The judge can only judge based on what he sees. ואין הוא רשאי ללמוד ממנו, and he's forbidden from learning from a precedent that he cannot agree with. Rabotai, our chachamim must operate in complete and total independence. Think about how we rule halachot today. Look, it's now Pesach time. I have a forum. We're answering, these are not big questions, Chevra. These are not like the things that all of Judaism is resting on. Are my corn chips kosher for Passover? They're mamash stupid, trivial matters. I know for some people they're really important. But it doesn't even get near the top 10,000 things that are important to the Jewish people. And look how much controversy. People are tripping over themselves. What about the water bottles? We heard the water bottles this year are chametz. And if we use those water bottles, what are they going to say about us? And We're all scared, not of legal precedent, bichlal of what other people are saying. In that kind of environment, you can never bring a Mishpat Tzedek. You can never expect righteousness in a place where everybody is worried about what someone else said before me, what someone else is going to say after me. A chacham must operate with independence. A bedin especially can rule things because that's what they decided we have to do here. Enzo schut, and I want to, maybe one more. You're all familiar with where this happened in halakha. So all of you know a story, and I'll fill you in on it, where this was a rule that was applied, and you know this, what I shared with you now, you already know. There's a famous story about 3 different gerim, potential converts, who came to Hillel and Shammai. You're familiar with the story? One came to Shammai, for example, and said, please teach me the whole Torah while I'm standing on 1 foot. If you can do that, I'll convert to Judaism. What did Shammai do?
Kick him out.
He chased him out, Ba'amat binyan. Now this is an Agadah, so for sure there's what to be learned from in an Agadic fashion here, why he chased him out with that stick, but he chased him out. And then he goes to Hillel, he tells Hillel the same thing. Convert me on 1 foot, teach me the whole Torah on 1 foot and convert me. And what does Hillel say? He doesn't chase him out. He says, sure, stand on 1 foot, I'll convert you. The next one says, convert me so I can become a Kohen Gadol. Can a Ger Tzedek become a Kohen Gadol? No. Can a regular Israel become a Kohen Gadol? No. So Shammai chases him out of the building. What does Hillel do? Hillel says, fine, I'll convert you. And then he teaches him that he can't be a Kohen Gadol. Let me ask you, in today's reality of our Giyur programs, all the endless ones, doesn't matter on the spectrum, who do we rule like, Shammai or Hillel? What does it look like the world? Imagine if someone came to the Bidin and said, Rabbi, I don't have time to learn in your program, just I'm standing on 1 foot, convert me to Judaism. What would you say if Hillel had a bedin for conversion today? What would they say about Hillel?
He's reformed, can't be trusted.
So for the record, I don't view reform to be a derogatory slur, okay? But they'll say about him, he's not a rabbi upstanding in the Jewish people. They're going to say about it's a kangaroo court, it cuts corners. You know what they're going to say about him. You know how this works. So how did Hillel do it? But Hillel was clearly right. So the Chachamim tell us that these 3 gerim found themselves together one day, and they said, Kabdanuto shel Shammai, the strictness of Shammai wanted to remove us from the world, and the acceptance of Hillel wanted to bring us into the Jewish people. Because of him we have, there should be more like him in the Jewish people. So what happened in the story? How could it be that Shammai reacted one way, and Hillel, listen, Chevra, Shammai was justified in saying, I'm not going to make a mockery of my Torah. I'm not going to teach you Torah on 1 foot. What was Hillel's justification? If you look there, if I'm not mistaken, even Tosafot mentions. And I say even Tosafot because it's not so simple that Tosafot would say such a thing. El nadayan elama she'enav ro'ot. When Hillel looked at this person, he saw sincerity, he saw genuinity in them. He knew that if he converted them to Judaism today, that one day they would become proper God-fearing Jews. And so he converted them today, even though the evidence, the facts, the requirements, the syllabus, the curriculum, the GPS, whatever requirements exist in the world today, the boxes didn't get ticked. But Hillel said, I know that this person will end up being a tzaddik. And so today I'm going to convert them, even though they're not in the right place. But Shammai was also right. What if halakha says that Hillel is correct? Were they really gerim? Of course. So why don't we hold Shammai to task? Because Shammai was also allowed to say, but in my bedin, my conscience doesn't allow me to do this. My conscience says that I can't convert a person who just wants to learn Torah in 5 minutes. But Hillel said I can. You all know this story. This story is not a chidush for you. The message of the story, though, was never taught to us properly. This is the absolute independence that a Beit Din needs when ruling in halakha. There are people that we rule one way now, that the syllabus doesn't match, chevra. They didn't tick all the right boxes yet. But we know that they will. On what basis do we know that they will? En la dayan, elama she'enav ro'ot. This is the basic rule of halakha. The dayan deals with what their eyes see. Let me continue. Enzo zchut, and just in case you're wondering, this is not a merit. Sheheinik Mishpat Torah l'dan b'Yisrael. It's not some privilege that judges, they don't have to worry about the facts. They can do whatever they want. It's not a privilege that's given to the dayan. Adrabah, to the contrary. Kal haya lo yoter ledayan lifsok behetem lechukim mugdarim uvurim. It would be so much easier for a judge to do what judges do today. What do judges do today? Judges today have, and I just posted a whole bunch of links in the Google Classroom, judges deal with what we call mandatory minimum sentencing. Are you familiar with this legal term? that sometimes, and it depends on which state you're in, there are some federal laws, there are federal laws, state laws, different places, different courts have different rules. That a person who comes for one crime, they need a minimum of 3 years in prison. So for example, it's possible that somebody that was suffering from severe pain and was 20 years old and had 15 painkillers in their pocket that they're taking for pain, they're illegal, of course, that person will receive a 3-year minimum sentence in prison. Why? Because that's what the law requires the judge to do. What if the judge says, listen, I'd rather make sure that you go to a doctor, you get your own prescription. It doesn't matter. The judge doesn't have the right to do that. This is called mandatory minimum sentencing. This exists in half the states in the United States of America. By the way, our prison populations doubled and tripled due to mandatory minimum sentencing. Essentially what it does to the judge, it takes the judge from being a judge to being a clerk. The judge has a book of codes, kind of like a rabbi today. There's a Shulchan Aruch. I don't need to know anything. I just need to tell you what it says in the book, right? If it's not in the book, it's not in the book. If it is in the book, it is in the book. I don't have to deal with your specifics of your situation. There's no analysis required. Says Rabbi Haim David Halevy, you think this is a good thing? Is that a good thing the judge could do whatever he wants? It would be so much nicer for the judge to do what judges do today. They just tell them what to do. They're responsible for, like you said before, they're the referee of the court. Make sure you speak nicely, you sit nicely, you bring the right type of evidence, and the ruling will happen based on what the law tells me I have to rule anyways. And to rely on precedents of other courts that came before them. In that way, the judge can say, listen, it's not my problem. I read a story about a man who was in prison based on 21 years, based on testimony by an expert witness about teeth marks, biting marks in a victim. All of that science was debunked not so long ago. And what does the judge say? Sorry? The judge doesn't say sorry. The judge says, I relied on the evidence that was in front of me. It's so much easier to be able to rely on evidence instead of actually promoting justice. אבל אין זו למעשה, אלא חובה משפטית עליונה לחתור במאמצי נפש גדולים. It's not a trick, this is a tremendous responsibility to use all of the human power given to you to reach the deepest truth you can. לרדת אל כל סבך עומק נפשם של העדים ובעלי הדין. To reach the inner workings of the soul of your defendant, of your witnesses, of all of the experts that are coming to court. Your job as a judge is to be so deeply in tune with everything that is happening right now in your courtroom. להשתכנע בעצמו, to be convinced yourself, לפני מתן פסק הדין, before giving the judgment, rendering a decision. שאכן נגלו לו כל תעלומות המשפט הנידון בפניו. To make sure that all of the secrets of justice have been uncovered by you. ואחרי שבטוח הוא שירד לכל עומק הדין. And once you are certain that the judgment that you're about to render is the most truthful judgment, here he quotes the Shulchan Aruch. Maran writes this in Choshen Mishpat, chapter 17, halacha 7. Maran says, מצדיק הדין בליבו, you justify this ruling in your heart, ואחר כך חותכו. And then you can release it to the public. Then you share your judgment. But the judge is not allowed to render a legal ruling until in his heart he knows, not thinks, he knows that this is the truth. And it's at that moment in time that he can say, I've done everything that I can do as a human being. Now I'm asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu that I should not make a mistake before him. What we learned today, and I'm going to stop here. I really wanted to do the next section, but it's okay. I really want you to walk away thinking about what it is we study today. This is not a regular part of the legal system as we're familiar with it. A tremendous dependency on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a reliance on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, while at the same time offering the judge a tremendous amount of independence to rule decisions based on their understanding of reality, to bring about the truth. The whole purpose here is to bring about the truth. Because in a true society, there can be justice. In a just society, there can be civility, and there can be normalcy, and there can be all of the things that we need in a society. And a judge is not allowed to rule based on precedent, based on laws, based on codes. This might apply to the Supreme Court, and to a state court, and to a city court. This also applies to every single Jewish person. I need you to know this also. In the matter of halakha, people tell me, well, listen, I'm from this country, so I must follow halakha that way. Why? If your mind and your heart and your studying has proven to you that a certain path to Torah is the correct one, on what do you rely to follow a path that you're relying on that is not good for you, that doesn't sit well with you? I wrote down a quote before I got here. Studying today. The Radbaz, in a Teshuvah, in volume 3 of his Teshuvot, Teshuvah 627, the Radbaz writes, וצריך שיהיו משפטי תורתנו מסכימים אל השכל ואל הסברה. The laws of our Torah must be in agreement with our mind and our logic. For sure, some of you, that's obvious, of course. But how many people live in a Judaism, in a Torah, in mitzvot, in observance of halakha that is not reasonable, it is not logical, it doesn't match with what they know to be true? Is it dangerous to say that? Of course it's a dangerous thing to say. But when we say a blessing in the Torah, Asher natan lanu et torato, Torat emet. Hashem, you gave us a Torah of truth. That's what we say. That's the blessing, right? It doesn't say you gave us a Torah of orthodoxy, a Torah of Chassidut, a Torah of Sfaradim, a Torah of Ashkenazim. It doesn't say that in the bracha. The bracha says Torat emet. You gave me a Torah of truth. So the only thing that is required in my study of Torah, the only outcome, is that my outcome should always reach the truth. What is the truth? There are rules. How do we study the truth? But a basic meter you could use to measure, is it logical? Is it sound? Does it agree with me? Do I agree with it? How can I rule something that I don't really agree with? I'm going to take good advice in general. There are many things that we try to teach the world. We try to teach our children, we teach our communities, the people around us. Harav Peretz, in his manual on being a rabbi, has a sentence there which he says, you should never teach a class on a topic that you don't really agree with. You haven't, lo shalem b'libcha. Your heart doesn't sit well with it. I can't tell you how many times I've come to give a shiur on a certain topic. And I've come there and I've taken the podium and it's a lot of people and they came to hear and I gave a completely different class. Because when I looked at those people and I looked at my heart and I looked at my neshama and I felt, I know that everything that I'm about to say is written in a book somewhere. But it doesn't resonate with me. It hasn't become mine yet. In my heart, I don't agree yet. I can't get behind this. So what value is there in teaching it? What value is there in sharing something that is not mine yet? Maran writes, Matzdik hadin belibo. Every judge, when rendering a decision, every lawmaker, children are the best lie detectors. We tell something to our children, don't lie to your children. Your children, they know when you're lying to them. They know it's the dad who shushes the kid in the synagogue and still goes back to talk to their friend. It's the liar who's trying to educate a generation to do something, but they themselves don't believe it. First, you have to be matzdik din b'libo. In your heart, it has to be whole. And then, only then can you render that decision. B'ezrat Hashem, next week we'll do this last paragraph here that we didn't get a chance to do. I'm hoping that we'll finish this all before Pesach. But for right now, I have assigned reading of 2 parts of Chacham Faur's book. Don't worry about some big words that are going to get in your way or references. It's okay. You can skip those parts. But to read the basic idea of what is a precedent, how do precedents work in halakha, when are we allowed to use them, when do we not use them, and to recognize that a court system, which is so highly personalized, you're right, Aliza was bothered by something true. Yochanan, you are telling us an answer that is true. This can only really work in a perfect world, in a perfect system. We're studying the halachot here of what a perfect society would look like. We're not telling you that with the people we have right now, this would be a great idea, or that execution of this would be possible. We're telling you the ideal. The ideal is that mother who stole formula from Walmart for her children, there's a way for her to pay for her crime that doesn't involve her children being taken away from her, doesn't involve going to prison, it doesn't involve losing more money she doesn't have. It involves the judge being able to judge, not based on a penal code or a required mandatory sentence that he has to hand down, but maybe to recognize this person in front of me, she needs help. She needs shelter. Maybe she needs a welfare program. Maybe she needs help raising her children. Maybe they need to get into a school. Whatever it could be. But a judge has to be empowered to be able to make those decisions. And we would never say in halakha that a judge who decided not to imprison that woman or decided not to take her children away from her is in violation of the law, is held in contempt of the law. We would say, what a righteous judge. What a dayan, a shofet, what a person who looked at the person in their courtroom and said, my job right now is an intervention. It's an opportunity to get a person, look, there's a drug addict in my court. I can slap a sentence on them. It's their third time. What do they say? 3 strikes and you're out. I can lock them up for life. That's a mandatory requirement in most states. But instead I can say, this person, they really tried hard. They messed up again. You know what? Because an addiction is an addiction. It's a real problem. I'm going to make sure that I get them the help that they need. Who knows? Maybe they'll graduate that program. Maybe they'll be able to get a job. Maybe they'll have a family one day. Maybe they'll have their own home one day. All because of a judge who said, I don't want to throw you down the drain. It's not about perverting justice or circumventing the law. It's about allowing our lawmakers the autonomy, the freedom. Kol hadan din emet la'amita. Any person who judges the truth. What is the truth? What HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants is a partner b'maaseh bereshit. Partners with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu in creating the world, in sustaining the world. And I believe wholeheartedly that all of us, Jewish people and non-Jewish people, the whole world can reach a place where Mishpat Tzedek, righteous judgment, real law, but righteousness. And half of that is on the shoulder of the lawmaker. Half of that is the job of the law, half is the job of the lawmaker, and the rest of it is ours. We can bring a Mishpat Tzedek to the world. And I hope very much that it's not something in the future that we will all live to see that day. Until then, I wish you all a wonderful night. B'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. God willing, those of you in San Diego, I will see you later tonight, shiur at 8:30. And for those of you in New York, we'll see you, God willing, on Monday night next week.